This podcast contains explicit content and discussions related to real-life criminal activities, including violence and sensitive topics. Listener discretion is advised. The host's opinions are personal and are not representative of any individuals or organizations involved in the cases. We strive for accuracy, but if you've missed anything, please let us know. Thank you for listening. Welcome to Rotten Minds. I'm Kay. It was a late night in the bustling city of Busan, South Korea, when a taxi driver got a seemingly normal passenger. His passenger was a young female, almost looked young enough to be a high schooler, and it was very late at night, and there was just something about the suitcase. It seemed like she was traveling somewhere far with her quite heavy black suitcase and all. But something was just off. He could feel it, but he couldn't put his finger on it. This is a fairly recent case, and when I say late at night, it is pretty late. It was the hour of the devil, as some people believe. It was 3 a.m. on Monday, the 27th of May 2023. And in this case, the belief might actually be validated. Well, she got out the taxi into a wooded park area near Nakdong Riverside near Hoppo Station. She took the suitcase out of the boot, and that is when the driver noticed the weight of the suitcase. The suitcase looked heavy. Thankfully, the passenger did not notice his confusion and just got the suitcase out and went into the woods. The taxi driver thought that she might need a ride back because where else would she get a ride back at 3 a.m. in the morning? The young woman did come back, but now the suitcase looked like it was almost empty. Much lighter compared to how heavy it looked before she ventured into the dark wooded area of the park. The driver did not say anything. He got back in and drove her back. But he felt something was seriously wrong, and due to his mounting suspicions and his gut feeling, he promptly called into the police at 112. The city of Busan is relatively safe, so this case hit pretty big. It was front page, frontliner, headliner news, and it might also be because of the peculiar details of the case. When police officers canvassed the said area that was pointed out to them by the taxi driver, they would find pieces of mutilated human body parts. Well, before we get into the case, here's a disclaimer. This episode includes discussions of violent and sensitive topics such as murder, dismemberment, and mutilation of a human. So please listen with caution. CCTVs near the taxi driver's initial pickup point captured a young woman with shoulder-length hair rolling down a suitcase alongside her down the sidewalk, walking with a bounce to her stride. She seemed to be in good spirits. In hindsight, it's really creepy, but then if you were a bystander who just seemed to notice her, she seemed like she would have just passed an exam, got a new job, because that's how happy she looked. She was practically bouncing off the sidewalk. Well, thanks to the taxi driver's quick thinking, descriptions, and the CCTV footages, just 5 hours after dropping her off, the young woman was identified, arrested, and held in custody for murder. Police had enough information to execute a search warrant for her residence, considering all the evidence mounting up around her. Eyewitnesses also reported her dumping suspicious, messy, bloody leggings and blankets in an opaque, huge trash bag outside before she left with the suitcase. So here's the thing about South Korea's justice system. So the names and images of suspects and victims are very protected and rarely disclosed to the public. This is a law that has been in effect since 1991 to protect the safety and dignity of both suspects and victims alike. From a society built on honor, there's a lot of what will the neighbors think kind of an environment going on. And I'm pretty sure that environment is prevalent in other societies as well, in other countries, but just felt like I had to put it out there. I'll admit that this sometimes becomes an issue in many cases, leaving perpetrators almost scot-free, and free to live in a society where they may reoffend, and it also leaves people around them unaware of their previous criminal histories. But again, when it comes to suspects, there's another aspect of the case, right? There is another dimension, that is wrongly accused suspects could find it really, really hard to live in a very, very judgmental society. And again, I'm just saying that it's not just in South Korea that this sort of a society can exist. I'm pretty sure it exists in other societies and cultures as well. And I feel like a testament to this would be the case of the Parasite actor Lee Sung-kyun. He was publicly let down by the society, and he ended up unaliving himself from the stigma, the stress, and the career repercussions, only to be found innocent right after he passed. But that being said, there are circumstances when these rights can be waived, especially for a violent crime of a violent nature. I believe that there's a recent revision to this. The new rule is called the mugshot law, and it is passed in October 2023, and it's effective from January 25th, 2024, that is this year. The law is that the mugshots of suspects in criminal cases will be released. This can also mean that if you end up at the wrong place at the wrong time, your face is likely to be front page news. It pretty much goes against the notion of innocent until proven guilty. Well, this is a big topic on its own, and I guess it's a debate for later. So now, back to our case. The suspect in custody in today's case was 23-year-old Jung Yoo-jung, born in 1999. She was best described by the people around her and her peers as an unemployed loner, pretty much invisible. Jung, who was raised by her grandfather and lived with him at the time of the crime, was an obsessed true crime fan. She had no real friends, and she had lied to her grandfather, who thought that she was preparing for a public civil exam. And in short, she basically isolated herself from any proper real-life interactions with other people. But then the first question that comes to my mind is, was she bullied in school? Is that what caused her to become like this? But it is pretty much confirmed that she was never bullied in school, but she literally was like a ghost in her own class, and she never bothered to interact with her former classmates. So if somebody did say hi to her, she would just ignore them and walk off. That was the kind of vibe that she was giving off even while she was in school. Her neighbor said that they had never seen her out of the house, and she would basically just reply yes or no to questions that warrant an answer. So she only answered her direct questions and with a yes or no answer. She was quite unremarkable and peculiar while she was in school itself, and she just gave off a strange vibe whenever someone tried to talk to her, is what her former classmates had to say about her. She was trying to take the civil service exam, but there was a problem. English was a requirement to pass, and she was very bad at it. Her English proficiency was at the level of a high schooler, which comes into play later. She pretty much isolated herself, read books, watched movies and Korean shows on true crime, and was obsessed with particular serial killers. To show how lonely she was, upon inspection by the police, they found that her phone contacts, it had 0 contacts or messages. Zilch. They also found her online digital footprint with like pretty much Google searches, I guess it's neighbor in South Korea, on how to murder someone, murder without a body, and a perfect murder. Initially, she told the police that she didn't kill the victim and was solely responsible for disposing the body, mainly because someone had threatened to kill her if she didn't do as told. But after being convinced by her family to come clean, 3 days later, she confessed to killing. And her motive? To know what it felt like to kill someone, and that she had an uncontrollable urge to kill. But before she confessed the truth, there were other stories that she had spun. Like when she told the police that the body parts belonged to her newborn child, when she literally had no signs of ever being pregnant. And as a person who's obsessed with true crime, she should have known that forensics could tell a child's body apart from a fully grown adult female's. The crazy thing about the case is the motive. And like I said, Jung wanted to know what it felt like to kill someone. So there's a term called morbid curiosity. By definition, it is a curiosity related to death, although it is not an indicative of a predisposition to commit murder. According to behavioral scientist Colton Scrivener, there are millions of people just in the United States that would probably consider themselves huge fans of true crime. But obviously you don't see millions of people going out and murdering people just because they're curious. So according to Colton, while true crime obsession can be a contributing factor to morbid obsession, it is just one among many factors influencing this fascination. Here's how Jung Yoo-jung searched for her potential victims. She thought that if her victim was random, she would not be caught. Jung spent months on an online tutoring app targeting English tutors in particular. She contacted 54 different tutors on the app, specifically looking for female tutors, before choosing a victim. South Korean parents are really involved in their children's education, so tutoring, especially for English, is quite common. She might also have looked for female victims because she might have thought that they were more overpowerable, at least to some extent by her, compared to a male victim. She then posed as a mother initially while contacting the victim, told the victim her non-existent child would show up at the tutor's house for a session. Then she ordered a high school uniform from a thrift store online right after, and then showed up to the victim's address for the quote-unquote class, dressed up as a high schooler on May 26, 2023. But she was equipped with rather unusual and dangerous accessory for a student. It was a knife. She was role-playing both the fictional mother and child. The name and identity of the victim is not made public for privacy in accordance with the Korean judicial system. Once inside the victim's house, and after realizing that she lived alone, Jung attacked the victim mercilessly in cold blood. She even stabbed the victim 100 times over. More specifically, I think it was reported as 111 times with her knife, even after the victim was deceased, just for overkill. She then planned for phase 2. She even went on as far as to wear the victim's jacket, which she is seen wearing in all the subsequent CCTV footages. Shortly after this, CCTV cameras captured Jung going back home to her house around midnight, bringing back a suitcase, walking to a supermarket, buying items such as knives, logs, zip ties, plastic bags, bleach, and then returning to the victim's house to finish the job, all while wearing the victim's jacket. That's just sadistic. It's almost as if she wanted to be the victim. The victim was a highly successful English tutor, maybe the same age as her, almost around the same age as her, or maybe even younger. And it might be a contributing factor as to why she was so specific about how she chose her victim. She then went ahead to dismember the poor victim's body, and then put some of the parts in the suitcase. It is then she calls for the taxi and goes to the wooded area to dump the dismembered body parts. She tried to strip the victim of her identity by keeping her identification documents like her license, purse, and mobile phone with her. She even cut off the victim's fingers to make it harder to identify the body. But she did leave an ID of the victim near the remains by mistake. She also emptied the suitcase and took it back to carry the remaining body parts a second time. All this to attempt to commit the perfect crime. Another possible motive to Jung's crime could be that she felt some sort of jealousy towards a successful victim who graduated from a prestigious university with an English degree, and that is something Jung sucked at. Jung Yoo-jung was convicted of murder, desecration, and abandonment of a corpse, and was sentenced to life in prison in November 2023. I feel like for the South Korean justice system, this sentence is not that common, but given the severity of the crime and the fear spread among the general public, and also about how public the case was, the sentence was upheld. When approached by the press while being led out in handcuffs with a bucket hat over her head covering most of her face, and being asked if she had anything to say, she apologized to the victim's family and said that she must have been out of her mind when she committed the crime. I just think, in my opinion, she was just sorry that she got caught. For a person obsessed with true crime, she left a lot of DNA evidence in her own apartment and in the victim's apartment. She also got caught in multiple CCTV cameras, and on top of that, she then expected not to be caught. Jung was made to take a psychopathy test. This test is known as the Hare psychopathy test, and it was made in the 1970s. This is a test that has been used to rank previous serial killers. So she scored a rank or a point higher than one of South Korea's most infamous serial killers, one who didn't even spare his own mother. A score of 15 on the scale is average. I think 5 or something is, normal. And points over 25 above are considered a psychopath. She scored 28 points, higher than serial killer Kang Ho-sun, who had scored 27 on the scale previously. Kang Ho-sun is a South Korean serial killer we can talk about the case in a later episode. He specifically targeted women. The authorities believed that if Jung Yoo-jung had not been caught when she was caught, she would have likely evolved to be a serial killer. Jung's grandfather in an interview profusely apologized to the victim's family for not, quote, raising his granddaughter right, unquote. I'm not sure how much he could have done to prevent this. Jung's parents were really busy and they had no time to look after her, so she pretty much grew up with her granddad. Maybe she felt, isolated and discarded from a very young age, but even then, I'm not sure. There are serial killers who's had perfect lives, especially amazing childhoods, who ended up becoming serial killers. So I guess it's a topic that we need to look into more and specifically discuss as to the correlation between childhood trauma and the possibilities or the chances of someone evolving to become a ruthless, cold-blooded killer or a serial killer. During the trial, Jung claimed that she had hallucinations and that she was mentally unwell. She told the court that she had been seeing and hearing the victim in her dreams. She had not been diagnosed with any mental conditions prior to the crime, but insisted she did suffer from mental disorders and she requested a mental evaluation. I just think that she was just trying to see if she could get away or get it easy by claiming the infamous not guilty by reason of insanity plea. Nevertheless, thankfully it was very evident that her crime was premeditated and well thought of in advance. Though the same can't be said about her careless disregard for CCTVs or leaving DNA traces behind, but anyway. And the court rejected her insanity plea. Apparently, Jung had also remarked about having strained relationships with her father, his remarriage, feeling betrayed and not getting along with her grandfather. One side note, just because you like listening to or consuming true crime content doesn't make you a psychopath. And most of us would like to be informed, aware, and alert of all the kinds of dangers that we're surrounded with on a daily basis. And personally, I would like to be informed about the things that go on to keep myself safe. And there's always the idea of coming across at least one psychopath in your life and not being able to identify the red flags. And I would say I listen to true crime or consume true crime content mainly because I like to be informed, know what to look out for. I mean, if you're listening to this, you pretty much would be a true crime fan, I'm guessing. And just because you consume true crime content doesn't make you a serial killer or a psychopath, It just depends on what you do with the knowledge. So here's the thing, I really like this quote because it summarizes everything that I was just trying to explain. That is, simply put, if you put yourself in the mind of the killer, it can help you escape the killer. And this is according to Scrivener, that I completely agree with. And again, this doesn't mean that you'd want to act out the crimes you hear about. Jung Yoo-jung will be eligible for parole after 20 years from the date of sentencing, meaning that she could be out and about in 2043. And by the time she would be, 44 years old, which is still quite young. She will still have some sort of a life to live, unlike the victim whose life was cut short, and the family who she robbed of a precious member, and left with lasting trauma and painful memories. And that was a case of Jung Yoo-jung, a 23-year-old true crime fanatic who killed to satiate her curiosity of what it felt like to kill someone. Do you guys think that she will reoffend when she gets out? If and when she gets out? What are your thoughts on the case? If you have any case suggestions, general suggestions, or opinions, leave them in the Q&A area on Spotify or in the comment section. As always, don't forget to support the podcast by following the show on whichever platform you're listening on and rating our show. And again, thank you for listening. We'll see you in the next episode. I'm Kay, and this was Rotten Minds.